Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the country. My name is Don Fisher, and again, I'm your host for Mom's Movement and Mindset, how to break through resistance and transform your body and mind. Excited to speak with my guest today. I have not had the pleasure of ever speaking to her before, so I'm definitely curious as to what we're going to get. And that, of course, is my guest today, Kelsa Dickey. She is the CEO and head coach at Fiscal Fitness Phoenix, say that 3 times fast. Her and her team help people across the country create a roadmap for their money that takes into account their next car payment, as well as their dreams and goals for the future. Whether your dream is renovating your home, paying off your student loans in a year, or taking a month off to bum around Europe, it is possible. With that, I give you Kelsa. What's up, Kelsa? How are you?
Hey, good. How are you? I'll keep you on your toes today.
Yeah, I hope so. I need it. So I guess we'll just jump right in. And so this panel of speakers so far, we've had people in different like facets of life. And obviously today we're going to be speaking a little bit about finances. So let's just start off like with your experiences here now. If you could just maybe like define in your experience, like what resistance is, and then also maybe provide some examples of resistance that you've witnessed from either active clients or potential clients.
Yeah, such a great question. As a financial coach, our focus is on the day-to-day part of money. So really building the new habits, acquiring new skills with what you have today. And over the last 10 years of helping clients, financial resistance is very common. It's actually more common than not feeling financial resistance. Money is the number one cause of stress in our country. It leads to migraines, they have found. So both frequency and severity of migraines. And unfortunately, it's the number one cause of divorce as well. So it really is a very pervasive problem in our world, unfortunately, right? And resistance when it comes to money shows up in 2 main ways, but really it's wanting something more from your money, wanting to do better with your money, wanting some new skills with your money, but not taking action towards building those new skills or doing new habits, right? And so that's where the resistance comes from, wanting something different, but doing the same thing you've always done, right? And we see it happen really in 2 main ways that a person experiences financial resistance, initially speaking, and that is either trying something new, so resistance towards trying something new, or resistance towards trying something that they've already tried in the past. So you can see that pretty much those 2 things cover almost everything when it comes to financial change, right? So it's either you're resisting something you've already tried or you're resisting something you haven't yet tried. See what I mean? And I think this happens because sort of the thought process or the story people buy into is, well, I've already tried that and it didn't work for me. So why would I bother to try it again? And what we find is we can make one small tweak to the way somebody manages their money. So maybe we change the day of the week they do something, the time of the day they do something, how often they do it, the actual tool they use, whether it's like an app or a notepad and a pen, right? We can just make one small change to something they've already tried.
I'm not sure I understand.
That was my phone or my watch.
I'm sorry. You're good.
I do not disturb too. And it does that to me at least once a day. I'm really sorry that it happened while we were
You're good. You're good. No worries.
And what we find is just one small tweak can actually take something from being a failure to being a success, right? But you've got to be willing to just sort of tweak and adjust and refine. And then the other resistance of like trying something new, this is where a lot of people buy into what we call rules of thumb when it comes to money. So like, you should always do this, or you should never do that, right? Or you should spend 20% of your income on this category of life. There's all these like rules that people have created around personal finance. We actually call them rules of dumb. And the reason is because we can take every rule of thumb that exists and find a way to poke a hole in it and say, here's one reason this wouldn't apply to a whole group of people, or here's one alternative approach that is also successful. And really what it boils down to is everything when it comes to money is customizable, right? And so not getting so bought into like there being one right way to do financial decisions.
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot of good stuff. The one thing that definitely stuck out to me, and again, I experienced this when I work with clients with, fitness and nutrition, but failure is not the end. It's just, and we briefly spoke about this in our first call together, but it's just a data point, but too often I feel like people, they fail and then they stop, they quit. And like you said, maybe that, whatever that customized approach was that they were taking, maybe they just need to change something up. And like working with you, like I'm sure you could probably explore a million different avenues to find the right plan for that person so that they don't quit and they keep moving.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say one skill that we hope to teach our clients is actually just curiosity. It's this idea of like, let me just scratch the itch of like, what did I like about that? What didn't I like about that? What did work? What didn't work? Instead of it being a very pass or fail situation, it's like taking that, breaking it down, keeping the parts that you enjoyed or that did work for you, discarding the rest and finding an alternative.
For sure. Yeah. Just, and honestly, like you talk about being, again, just I'll end with this final point, but like being customized, just the picking and choosing as time goes on, that's going to make over time, like things so tailored to the client. So I love that. Okay. Why would somebody experience resistance when they want nothing more than to change?
I believe the answer around that is really just sort of psychology 101, or the way our mindset works. And our mind craves the familiar, right? Like it wants to do things that are familiar because that's safety. That's what feels good to us. Also, our mind will always seek pleasure over pain. And so sometimes when we know we're about to create change in our life, we experience growing pains, right? Like doing things. I think about when you work out for the very first time, in the first few days, you're like so sore, you can like barely walk up and down your steps. But then the more you work out, the more your body gets used to it, right? But you got to get through those initial pains of like a new routine. The same applies with money and a change in general in your life, which is that I know this is going to be hard at first, right? And so if you go into it telling yourself that, and your mind wants to avoid pain at all costs, it wants to keep pleasure, by even just acknowledging that, you're sort of setting yourself up for a little bit of failure, right? It's almost easier to say, this is going to be hard at first, and I am choosing that hard, right? Like accept that hard into your life, as opposed to saying like, oh, this is going to be really hard. Oh no. Right. So I think change is simply because anything new is unfamiliar, and our mind wants what is familiar. So it wants to keep us in the habits we've always had, even if they're no longer serving us well. Right. So what we tell our clients is, yeah, some of these things we're going to try will feel clunky at first. They're going to feel awkward. You're going to have some growing pains. We have to stick with it long enough to make it familiar, that the new habit becomes the familiar habit. And then it actually feels unfamiliar to do it your old way again. Really, I think one milestone we always shoot for, there's like financial milestones we're shooting for, whether that's a certain debt level or savings or net worth and that kind of thing. But we're always looking for other types of milestones, the intangible ones. And one of those is when a person says, I don't know how I could do this any other way now. Right. That's when you know, like you've reached that really great familiar point of like, this is just now my routine. This is the way I do things. This is who I've become now.
So when you take somebody who it's raw, right? They're just starting to work with you. You kind of started getting into a little bit there, but maybe share some of your tips here, like some of the things they actually do with the clients to help them overcome that pushback and that resistance that they're facing, and help them to kind of commit to your program and your roadmap to keep them moving so they don't stop.
Yeah, two main things I would say. The first one is we always talk about their goal or their why first. And this is where so many people think that they will come to us and they will say their goal is to get out of debt. Okay, that's a very common, popular goal that our clients have when they first come to us. My challenge for them, though, is that's actually not your goal. That is how we're going to achieve a goal. But why do you want to get out of debt? What is the purpose of getting out of debt? What will getting out of debt afford you? What opportunities does it present for you? What doors will it open for you? Why will you feel differently when you're out of debt? Like, really, why do you want to get out of debt to begin with? Whatever that is, that's actually the goal, right? And getting out of debt is just how we achieve that. So some clients will say, well, gosh, I'd really love to travel more, or I'd love to get another house where my, adult children live so that I can be with them more. And it's like, well, that's the goal. And you getting out of debt just sets you up to be able to achieve that goal, right? So step number one is you've got to really get clear on why it is you want to make the change to begin with, because that is what gets you through those growing pains and doing the hard things, right? The desire for something better and bigger. So that's number one. Number two is we start by meeting with our clients weekly, which for some people might seem pretty intense, but we are touching money every single day. We are either spending it, thinking about it, making decisions. Everything we do, money is touching. And so if we don't meet weekly, a lot can happen in a period of time. And our goal is always to be planning 1 week out. Okay. So instead of looking behind you with your money and saying, what did I spend last month on gas or groceries? We actually don't really pay attention to that at all when we first start with our clients. We meet with them weekly and we say, okay, what do you need money for in the coming week? Let's plan the coming week out. And then we meet a week later and we say, how accurate were we? How close did we get to what actually happened and what you actually needed money for? And then we do it again. Okay, now what do you need money for the coming 2 weeks? Okay. And then the coming 3 weeks. And what we're doing is we're flexing that muscle of learning how to be intentional with your money, learning what you are going to be spending your money on in the future. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
And so it's just a very different mindset that we're really shifting early on. And those two things combined, knowing that I'm getting better at planning ahead with my money and getting intentional, which means I can put my money behind what's most important to me. And I know exactly what's most important to me, and it's becoming more tangible. I can feel it. I'm talking about it more. We always talk about the goal and we say things like, have you thought of anything else with your goal yet? Has there any other observation come to your mind? Because sometimes our clients, when they first come to us, haven't actually said their goal out loud to anybody before until they've said it to us, right? And even, unfortunately, so many times they haven't even acknowledged it to themselves yet. Right. And so what happens is over those first few meetings, we're sort of just peeling back the layers and giving them permission, honestly, to share their dreams with us and share those goals with us. And when they do that, they actually start to explore it more themselves and they start to define it even better. It starts to become much more tangible, right? They start to think about the house they actually will want to buy, not just the fact that they want to buy a house. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it starts to become more real. And at the same time, they're learning to trust themselves and they're saying, hey, I was pretty darn close with what I thought I needed money for this coming week. That's starting to feel really good. So they're learning to trust themselves.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like, not that we want to live in the future, but you were kind of talking a little bit before about what holds people back is the feeling of comfort, but it's almost like projecting the feeling that they're going to have when they attain that goal. And it almost supersedes or overpowers the feeling of comfort to go through the discomfort to achieve that new feeling that you've kind of helped them to uncover, I guess, when you go through the layers and the whys as to what the outcome is and hey, what's below that.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you that we're always trying to be very mindful and being present and, being present wherever your feet are. Right. And saying here's the life I'm living. And one form of resistance or one place where financial resistance stems from actually is a lack of belief or lack of trust in ourselves that we can do better with our money, right? I mean, we're surrounded by people who aren't planning ahead financially and aren't setting goals with their money and that sort of thing. And unfortunately, what happens is so many people in their mind, they highlight all of the decisions they made in their past that they regret or that were maybe not the best financial decisions. And so what we're trying to do by just planning 1 week out and then 2 weeks out is help to show somebody that they can trust themselves, right? That they can learn to actually make really good decisions. And we want to highlight all of those really good decisions and use the ones where it's like, okay, well, we forgot about that expense. We didn't even talk about that and it happened. How can we learn from this going forward? That's where that curiosity comes in, right? Like, how can we make sure that the next time we're thinking about the next 2 weeks out, we don't forget something like this happens? And so that's where all the different tools that we have created over the years come from to help people stay organized with those types of like whammies that pop up.
Yeah, it seems like, as babies, right, we're blank slates. And as we go through our life, you're talking about the beliefs, like when it comes to money, yeah, I mean, we are so conditioned to certain beliefs surrounding money. So that sounds awesome. Like we're working with these clients here and you're helping them to like recondition, like basically break down that old belief and develop a new belief, which is obviously very empowering. And then you have the tangible, like the outcome goals and the things that they accomplish to even just reinforce that.
Yeah. And just to emphasize what you're saying, how true it is, I'll have a client come to a session and they'll sort of want to brag and say, hey, I said no to this thing that I wanted to purchase because I knew I couldn't afford it. And they're like feeling proud of that, right? They want me to feel proud of them. And I will say, how do you know that you can't afford that? How did you make that determination? And they'll just say, I just know that I can't. Right. And I'll say, I want to challenge that belief. Maybe you can, and maybe you can't. That's not for me to decide. Let's take a look at your numbers and see if you could afford this or not. But I want to challenge whether or not that belief is actually accurate. And I cannot tell you how many times we look at the numbers and that person could afford that item. So it's one thing to say, no, I don't want to spend my money on that. I'm choosing to put my money towards something different that's more important to me. That's not what we're talking about here. It's another thing entirely to say, I can't buy that because I can't afford it when you can. Right. And so this is where they have convinced themselves, they're conditioned to think when they want something, they probably can't afford it. Because if they've come from a financial position where they've struggled for years, that is a very common situation they've probably found themselves in. Right. But it doesn't mean that it's always accurate. It doesn't mean that that's always the story.
I love that because, yeah, I mean, there's a very clear, like tangible way to quantify whether you can afford something or not. And like you said, it's just look at your budget. What are you spending? Can you or can you not? And that's, yeah, it's so true. It's more of the choice. I love the way you phrase that. It's more of the choice. Like I'm choosing not to spend my money on this, not I can't purchase this because I can't afford it.
Right.
And that's definitely
in
a
one
distinction that
sense,
people need to make.
In one sense, you are in control of that decision. It is the decision that you are making. And in the other one, it's sort of like a victim approach of like, this is happening to me, right? I don't have a choice. And you do have a choice a lot of the times. So many times once we get control of our money and we start to see it very clearly, it is actually very easy to manipulate. And I know manipulate kind of has a negative connotation to it so many times, but when it comes to our money, that's actually a good thing, right? Like we are so in control of it that I know I can just lower this level and this lever over here will go up, right? Or so if I want something, I can just look at my plan and say, how can I make this happen if I want it that badly, right? So like, I'm going to lower this, and this expense so that I can add this one over here, right? And I actually think that's a very empowering thing where it's like, if I want this, I can make this happen for myself.
And I think that speaks very strongly to back to the why again. Because people absolutely can, if at least in that very moment, the way their budget is set up, I'm assuming they can't afford it, right? You went through the numbers, like you're saying, hey, pull lever number one, right? They can lower or do away with a certain expense that maybe is not serving them to create the space for the thing that they do want. But whether they want it or not, I think that comes back to their why again, that desire to make the change.
Exactly. So if you're grounded in that, you can always say, does this get me one step closer to that? And it's not to say everything that we spend money on has to be practical or responsible or in alignment with a goal, right? Like you can spend money just because you will enjoy it that day, right? You can, that is absolutely okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the awareness of what kind of choice you're making that's important, right?
I mean, I work with clients like with their food. Like I tell them
Mhm.
like, hey, if you're feeling hungry and it's about dinner time, pause, right? And say, maybe I should have dinner first and then
Mhm.
have your snack. Where too often they just on impulse go get like a cookie and then like they're not having dinner, like real food, which is going to benefit them. So I love that because it's like, listen, you can pause and you say to yourself, I'm going to choose to not have dinner and I'm just going to have a snack, then you made that choice. That's on you. But to just simply act out of impulse, I feel like sometimes it won't serve them. But I love the fact that you say there's that flexibility there. They still have the choice.
Well, and I think what you're describing is such a perfect segue into what we also wanted to talk about, which was how does overcoming resistance with your money develop strength in order for you to then overcome resistance in other areas of your life, not related to money, right? And this is exactly it. I always say that the skills we acquire in one area of our life are transferable. We simply change the currency on them. So when you get really good at managing your nutrition or your macros or your calories or however you're doing it, those skills are very transferable into also managing your money and into managing your time, right? And your schedule. And all we're doing is we're taking the same mindfulness practices and saying, how can I be more intentional with, another area of my life? I'm just going to change the currency on it.
Yeah, I love that. The fact that I didn't even have to ask the question. That was my last question, but it flowed right into
It
it.
just flowed perfectly.
Yeah. I don't know
Yeah.
if there's anything else you want to maybe expound on that last question again, just to reiterate how overcoming an obstacle will ultimately like condition somebody, right, and build resilience to make it even easier to then face larger obstacles. So I don't know if you want to finish with any other
Yeah.
final points around that, but
I think it's like, well, why? How come that happens? And I think that happens because it comes back to that trust factor, trusting ourselves that, hey, I've already overcome something very similar. I can do this too, right? So we learn to trust ourselves in our own strength. And I think what it does is it gives us the ability to draw on our own proof that we have done something. So instead of looking to somebody else and saying, well, how does that person over there manage their time, right? Or manage some area of their life? We can look to ourselves, our own experiences, and say, what's an area of my life where I can draw on my own proof that I've already done this really well? It's just in a different area of my life, but I know I can do it. And so it just boosts confidence. It helps us to trust ourselves and say, like, I've done it once, I can do it again, which I think is just so important.
yeah, and I guess the final note here too is just like when there's a part one of it is like the awareness. And I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe when somebody realizes like, hey, I have the awareness, but I still have not been able to make that change, working with someone like you
Mm-hmm.
is only going to support that. And I don't think there's anything wrong in that. That's an investment in their growth and like helping them to move the needle forward in their life. And in this case, specifically with their finances.
Yeah. And I think so. You have to gain self awareness first. And then once you gain self awareness, you can begin to self manage and self coach, right? So you can't self manage and self coach without self-awareness. So acknowledging it, identifying it, being aware of it is always the first step. And then in some areas of our life, yeah, maybe we can sort of adopt a do-it-yourself approach, or we can, read a book and figure it out. There are some areas where it's like, yeah, maybe that is possible. And it's okay if there are some areas where it's not, right? Where it's like, you know what? I've tried a few different things and I need an expert to really help guide me in self-managing and self-coaching and give me the tools that I don't know exist, or I haven't found them yet, or to help me finesse all of these various strategies I'm learning about into my life and help me find a way. But the idea is that you should never be dependent on the other person who's giving you the tools, right? So the idea is to learn the skills of self-managing and self-coaching. And I always say it's not sexy, but really what we help people with is critical thinking with their money, right? I mean, that really is what it boils down to. So if every time a client calls me and says, hey, can I buy this? I give them an answer, they will always need to call me when they want to buy something, right? And that is not a great skill to teach them, right? Like that is not good. That's not what we're going for. So my job when someone calls and says, can I buy this, which does happen often, or like in a session, they'll ask, they want me to grant permission. And I very rarely say yes or no. It's usually like, let's take a look. Let me show you what I'm looking at to help you make this decision for yourself. And you let me know what you're seeing, right? So we're helping to sort of build the critical thinking skills.
Like teaching somebody how to fish.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly. Awesome. All right. Kelsa Dickey, CEO, head coach at Fiscal Fitness Phoenix. Kelsa, thank you again so much for taking time out of your day, out of your schedule to bring value to this summit. I know you're going to help somebody with the insight that you offer here today.
Thank you for putting it all together. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you again.